Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. Great day. Welcome back to the show. Native Assets, Sae'Von Springer, founder and managing partner of Native Assets, author of the Blockchain Blueprint. And today we're bringing things back full circle because we did a deep dive into music NFTs a few months back. Who knows, maybe a few years back, depending on when you're listening to this. But in that video, we talked about Metastars, virtual artists who exist natively in the digital dimension. And one of the leaders in that space is Hume Collective. They have an artist right now by the name of Angelbaby, who just so happens to be among one of the top performing artists in all of Web3. And when we get into 2023, the goal is to push that into the areas beyond Web3, your Spotify's, your Apple Music's, all these other platforms. And today, I'm very grateful to be joined by the co-founder of the Hume Collective, David Beiner. Welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's great to be here.
Thank you for making the time. I know I kind of jumped in the Discord, tried to find the right person. And so I really appreciate you making that time. Yeah. No, thank you. So if you could, because there are going to be plenty of people who are still unfamiliar, if you could just set us up to help us understand what a Metastar is, what Hume is, and what you all are doing.
Definitely. So yeah, Hume is a Web3 entertainment company focused on creating iconic Metastars. So what is a Metastar? A Metastar is a virtual music artist, a virtual artist that is fully 3D, fully animated, and releasing music on Spotify, talking on Twitter, jumping into the Discord, just like a human artist would, except they are, completely animated and 3D. And one really easy way to think about Hume is if Pixar and your favorite record label had a Web3 baby, that's one way to think about it. We create characters with deep backstories that are fully animated in the way Pixar does, and then we are distributing music, getting music out there, and trying to break these artists that we create, just like a record label would.
Mm. And something that helped me wrap my mind around this was thinking about the Gorillaz band from back in the day, right? Where it's like when they came out, they were doing something very different where there was no artist that you actually saw. It was just this animation, very stylized, but they went on to, have chart-topping records and albums and perform shows. And now you take that more current day, you have artists like Marshmello who, are pseudonymous and, sure, you can physically see that person in real life, but ultimately they maneuver throughout their career and publicly as this kind of distinct entity from who the person is behind the music itself. So I just, put that in there so that there's some precedent for those listening that this is something that the technology is now enabling it to be done in a much different way.
Yeah, I think in 20 years or 30 years when there's tens of millions of virtual artists and you kind of draw a graph of okay, what was the first one and what did it look like, and then where did it go later? Almost if you look at Disney, it was what did those early Mickey Mouse cartoons look like with Mickey in black and white, and then there's Pixar movies and The Incredibles and Finding Nemo and Toy Story and the Lion King and all that over here. You could say that the Gorillaz is that first one of those first examples of a virtual artist here. And then, what's going on with, what we're doing with Angelbaby and possibly soon Cleo, who we've been talking about on Twitter. And, there's other examples out there in the world beyond Hume, but that is the Gorillaz are really, an early baseline. And I'd say the big difference between the Gorillaz and what we're doing, I don't know if the beautiful honking of Los Angeles just made it into this podcast, but I heard it, is that when we're creating our Metastars, and obviously, if Angelbaby was here, I have to say, Angelbaby is real. We love Angelbaby. They wouldn't be, that Angelbaby is real. Angelbaby is here. But the way we approach it is developing this like really deep backstory and having a team of people that come together to create Angelbaby. And it's not like there's one artist in the room and we're just throwing that artist into a mocap suit and then, creating music. It really is a team. And again, in the way Pixar creates movies, we create these virtual artists, where with the Gorillas, it was still, everybody knew who the people were behind the music, and it was, from a pretty reputable artist.
Mm-hmm. Now, that is one of the core differentiators, is that everything can be curated when you are doing something with a Metastar. And so there's a lot in this conversation that I hope that we can get to. But just briefly, creatively speaking, how deep do you all go before, for instance, well, obviously, Angelbaby is the artist that you all have right now. How much did you all have figured out when you put out, kind of first to the world, that Angelbaby was here and was going to start making a splash? Because I imagine you don't want to wait till you have everything figured out, and you want to leave some room for spontaneity and diversity. So how do y'all strike that balance?
Yeah, it's a great question that we try and continue to strike every day. I think what's really interesting about Web3 and Metastars is they need to be as iterative as all the other projects out there. And, all these other projects are opportunistic. They see where the technology is going and they take advantage of those moments, or they leave the backstory. Bored Apes, like the backstory of Bored Apes is like so broad. There's so many directions that could have gone in. So for us, it was always important to have a really, really deep overview and backstory for Angelbaby that we knew about and we know about internally. Like, we know what year Angelbaby's from. We know some of the key pieces in Angelbaby's life that makes him act the way that he acts in this day and age. But there definitely is a lot that we keep open. Not so much that we keep open, but we only reveal so much because, first of all, you don't want to give it all away on day one, and you want the story to progress. And then as that story is progressing, there's new opportunities that emerge. And I'd say like the most interesting part of a Metastar is not so much the past backstory, because that actually is like fairly set, big picture. And we know Angelbaby's life from before they got here. For those of you who don't know, Angelbaby's from the future, the year 3045. They came through a cybergate. They're here in our time now. As has been revealed recently, they perhaps lost the love of their life on their way over here, Cleo.
Fighting the Zani Republic.
Fighting the Zani Republic, thank you, which is an evil republic that has taken over the metaverse and censored everything, like art, culture, music. So in the future, in 3045, it's all done, art, concerts, all these things are done underground and actually in the Spot, which is a place the Hume Collective has. So to your point, a lot of this backstory exists. What gets really interesting is like what Angelbaby does on a day-to-day basis and how that story is written. And I'd say like that story is an extremely iterative process, and it's a balance we have to strike every day, because we might think Angelbaby is going to do one thing next week, and maybe it doesn't make sense for them to do that next week. Just like a real person, honestly. It might make sense. I'm sure like Taylor Swift's management team, and they'll get together and they'll be like, oh, we're going to make this announcement next Wednesday, and then something will happen in the world on Tuesday, and they'll be like, you know what? Like, we're pushing that back 2 weeks. Or actually, we're going to do this tomorrow. So it's extremely iterative. Short answer on that day-to-day basis.
No. I think that's important, so that it does, people can feel the aliveness of a character, of a star. Just earlier today, I was on Twitter. I was in Miami for Art Basel, got back on Saturday, and I see that apparently, Angel's cooking up with Rio
Yeah.
Cragen in the booth. So being able to kind of see those natural interactions come together, so that there is that dynamic of, just like anybody might want to follow, X artist or Y artist, they can still do the same thing. And Angel shows up in the Discord, shows up in the Twitter Spaces, all those sort of things, what I think is a good touch. So talking about backstory, right, and technology, and hopefully you bear with me. I try to flow these things in a logical order.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just go where we're already talking. Angelbaby, for those who may not know, is the avatar, the character itself is a Fluf from Fluf World, right? So something that was interesting to me is making the cognitive leap that you and Jay and whoever else is on y'all's team, y'all were thinking about this for a while. You didn't just turn over, mid last year and say, you know what, let's do this Metastar thing. Let's bet out Hume. Let's go after it. Do you get what I mean, though? Like, you all had to be working on this for some time. And so what I'm curious about the decision to choose Fluf, right? A Fluf to represent Angelbaby. And then knowing that Fluf World exists within the larger Futureverse ecosystem, which, for those who do not know about the Futureverse, shit blows my brain how you cannot know about it at this point. But it's interconnecting all of these disparate, honestly, pieces of technology that are then conveyed to people through the Trojan horse of lore, of narrative, and of NFT projects. And so how much of that was already something that you all knew you wanted to include yourself in a larger ecosystem like that, versus as you were building out, you start to see some things develop, you have some biz dev calls, you start to kick it internally, and you're like, you know what, man, this shit really can take what we're doing to the next level?
So Jay and I had actually been thinking about virtual artists since 2016, 2017. Mm-hmm. So we'd been thinking about virtual artists for a while before our favorite Metastar came, onto the scene. And we actually had we'd been offered a record label earlier and realized that wasn't the best route, and then decided to raise money, did a seed round for Hume. And right when we closed the seed round, there was a huge shift that had happened. We actually had a different set of virtual artists that we were going to build kind of an NFT ecosystem around. And between us doing the raise and the seed round, Bored Apes had come out, and this idea of whether, open IP, the fact that you could buy an ape and own all the IP around it and do whatever you want with the ape had, become a thing very, very quickly. And we were like, well, the hardest part of launching an artist or a product or anything is really having those early adopters. And if we can launch one based off a PFP project, we'll at least get those early adopters from we won't necessarily get those early adopters guaranteed, but we'll at least know that there's an audience that's going to see what we're doing. And if they see what we're doing and they like it, we at least have distribution. Basically, it's almost like being able to get a spot on a Spotify playlist, or if it's the early 2000s, guaranteeing you're going to be on TRL. Now maybe everybody hates it, and now they all move on. Luckily for us, we got that, and then everybody liked it. And the reason for we were poking around, and the choices were there was Bored Ape Yacht Club, obviously, and at the time ON1 Force, if anybody remembers that project, and a couple others we were looking at. Some of the ones that I don't, Clonex, Azuki, I don't think Doodles, none of those existed yet. And we came across Fluf World. And what fascinated us about Fluf World was a couple things. One was that the avatar, the Fluffs were 3D. So
fully
a lot
rigged.
of the other things we were looking at were 2D, and we're like, well, we're about to go make a 3D, fully virtual character. This is really interesting that this is already in 3D. The second thing was that the NFTs, for those of you that don't know, all the NFTs in the Futureverse ecosystem are like this, but they're multimedia. So you have your PFP, you have a background, and you have a sound, and all those are interchangeable. And the sound was that we were like, oh, these NFTs already incorporate music, and we want to have, the biggest virtual artist of all time. This makes a lot of sense for us to, look at this project more. And we had a call early with Aaron and Alex and eventually Brooke, and really like their team. And yeah, we're like, they're thinking about music from the start. They're thinking about NFTs similarly to the way we're thinking about them. And by October, Angelbaby existed. October, I believe the date was October 21st. Angel's
Nice.
first public day.
Nice. It's I appreciate you mentioning what other collections were in the running, because I get to kind of think about how different the aesthetic would be in the vibe. Because obviously to us, we don't know Angelbaby but anything but a Fluf. But to picture that as an Oni Force character or somebody else is a bit of a stretch. And with that, when you're thinking about Cleo and you're thinking about these other artists that inevitably are going to come through Hume, are you all thinking about them, kind of staying with what you've already done, or is it still an open idea, an open discussion about if you carry that through of, okay, Angelbaby's a Fluff, so the rest of these should be Fluffs, or in that kind of open metaverse mindset, staying flexible so that it makes sense with who the artist is supposed to be? Maybe it's a Latin-themed artist, maybe it's somebody on a different tangent of music, but just curious how you all are thinking, to the extent you can discuss how you're thinking about the rollout of these future Metastars through Hume.
Yeah, for us, I think one of the coolest things about Web3 is the composability. And one of the coolest things about open IP is if we start to think about IP in the way people think about software, open source software is the ways you can start to combine IP. And as you combine those IP, you can effectively interact with more and more audiences. So we think of each of these communities or like IPs as building blocks that can be put together. And sometimes it might make sense to have a whole set of Fluffs. Sometimes it might make sense to have a Fluff and some from some other communities. So for us, it's really about staying open and incorporating communities that we feel speak to the aesthetic of the Metastar we're trying to build, and that we think pair well with the aesthetic and world that we already have established. So there, I think we'll continue to not only have like Metastars from other communities, but there's also the opportunity to create completely new ones that aren't from a community necessarily.
Mm. Is that part of the direction that, and this is available information, but it's been communicated if you hold a Hume Genesis, of which I am a holder as well, full disclosure, but if you have one of those, you hold it for long enough that eventually there's going to be a mint of, not Angelbaby necessarily, but there's some sort of collection around Angelbaby.
Yes.
So I imagine that might
for each of those Metastars, yeah.
Okay. Word.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say, because we didn't really get into this, are some of the biggest differences with a Metastar that you don't really get from a traditional artist? And then we can talk a little bit about the Hume Collective as a whole and the kind of involvement that those who are in the Hume Collective get to have thus far, and then potentially down the road, how that might evolve.
Yeah. Maybe we can, I'm going to combine the answer.
Go for it.
Into one. I think what's really special about Metastars is they can exist in ways that we're not used to seeing artists exist. And sure, I say this, yes, Justin Bieber can show up one day, and if he has an art in Sandbox, or do a virtual concert, or be in a video game. Harry Styles can do that. Billie Eilish can do that. But there is something really special about having a character that is, let's speak for Web3 for a second, that's like Metaverse native and Web3 native. And there's always going to be like a little bit of an uncanny valley when you see a human artist that like they're human, that they walk around on the street. Like you're just like, your perception of Justin Bieber or of Harry Styles is very specific because of all the content you see of them. So now if you suddenly see them in like a video game, or you see them in a, virtual concert, you kind of know it's not them. Like the game doesn't really fully work, in my opinion. And what's really cool about an artist like Angelbaby is you only know Angelbaby in the context of them being a Metastar and virtual. And you've never seen, because it doesn't exist, like you've never seen Angel Baby, looking like you and I, it's like on a Zoom call hanging out, like, you know what Angel Baby looks like. You know what, in this case, like, you know what other fluffs look like. You're used to seeing other fluffs in a 3D native way. So when I think about like what makes these virtual artists special, it's like as we increasingly move into a world that is virtual, where more things are happening online, you're going to want artists that are naturally from that world. And I think people are going to, in many ways, relate to artists that are born in a virtual setting, in virtual spaces. So it's not to say like there's going to be tons of successful human artists until the end of time, because humans are incredible. But there's also now going to be like these virtual artists that are really successful in virtual spaces. The same way, I'm sure if they would have had podcasts in the 20s, someone would have said something along the lines of like, hey, these movies you all love, like there's still going to be movies that you love, and humans are going to be in these movies, and the movies are going to be amazing. But now we're going to have these animated movies over here that you're not going to see like a human, and you're going to see completely animated characters, and people are going to love these animated movies. So it's really the birth of, as we have new mediums to play in this case, the metaverse, having these metaverse native stars, I think is going to give people an artist, a character that they relate to more while in those spaces. And when they're out of those spaces, maybe humans have the advantage. Maybe there will be incredible like hologram concerts, but you'll be expecting that kind of interaction. So that's what I think is really special. Like we're living in a more virtual world.
Yeah.
That virtual world needs virtual metaverse native artists. Now, second part of what you were saying, which we're really proud of what we've built, is how do you interact with these artists, and how do we think the future of interacting with an artist looks like? So we've built a platform called The Spot. And if you own a Hume Genesis NFT, you're basically able to sign in with your NFT, go through a token gated experience where we believe you're guiding the career of our Metastars, in this case, Angel Baby. So what's that mean to like guide the career of an artist? It means to be part of their decisions around like what singles they release. It could mean being part of decisions around what their merch looks like. And when you look at Web3, I think these kinds of voting mechanics that allow the community to be involved in the content creation and kind of this co-creation mentality is a huge part of what's going to make artists, not just artists, but projects in general, successful. And the way we think about it is like, one of the biggest advantages K-pop fans have is they have like a full Twitter army of a legion of Twitter fans behind them. Now imagine like a bunch of fans that own Angel Baby's NFT, that chose the song that is going to be Angel Baby's next release. Now we do a mint, they buy that song, now they own the music NFT, and now that song comes out on TikTok and Spotify and all over. Those fans are going to be like, well, that's my song. Like, I chose that song. I'm part of that song. I feel like that. And, and I'm, part of part of the team and coming up with all this. And like, when we were doing the All Gold Spaceship, man, I was like, oh, damn. I voted on this. Like, I was part of choosing. Yeah. I think I voted for What Happens When We Die, to be honest.
That's the one I want to vote for. Yeah.
I voted for What Happens When We Die, but, still, it's a really special moment, and it's a really special trajectory when you think of a world where an artist's biggest fans are now giving them input. Because the way it works right now is if an artist is part of a record label, the record label's usually making those final decisions. There's managers involved, there's a record label involved, there's sometimes
a lot of cooks up in the kitchen.
There's too many cooks in the kitchen. And why not? Like, the fans know best is the way I think about it. Like, the fans know what they want to hear from their favorite artist. And that's really powerful.
So I agree with all that. The mild pushback I'll give you, and I also feel like I understand it from an operator standpoint, you can't just give all the creative decision-making power to the fans because they're still a bit far from it, right? So even when there's a decision between all gold spaceships and what happens when you die, that's a decision that ultimately is chosen based on other songs that might already be in the catalog and the roadmap and, what makes sense, like you were saying earlier. Cool, on Thursday next week, we're making boom, boom, boom announcement. You get to Tuesday, be like, actually, we might need to push this announcement to next week, whatever it is. And I think that's what's cool about what's going on with Clio and that whole process with the seasons and everything. And y'all just announced this a couple of days ago, but being able to decide the song at the end of each of these seasons throughout the curation process of the album. And to your point, that's never really been done before. Like maybe there's some artists that had a Patreon account and it was like, hey, if y'all really support me,
Yeah.
they got a Patreon, they're in a certain leg of their career of independence that's much different than what's going on in this situation. And one thing that I was really curious about is when I initially came across Hume and I saw the prospect of, okay, it's a record label for these Metastars. To your point of what you said earlier, I'm like, oh, it's the record label. And this Genesis NFT, I'm a part of that? I was like, okay, so the record label, they the ones that get the check, right? So you mean we get some of the check? And that's not what y'all are doing right now. But I'm just curious if you could walk us through those sort of, because I imagine plenty of people hit y'all with that question, and there's some regulatory things there, there's some compliance things there, and we see folks like what Bilal is doing with Royal, but that's not the model that's in place right now for Hume. What made y'all confident and comfortable in sitting on that decision to separate those two things?
So for us, we looked at this for a while and we talked to different legal teams, and there's a couple things. One is it's very complex to figure out how to issue royalties from music. First of all, that in itself, period, it's very complex. Because there's songwriters involved, there's producers involved, there's the artists involved. Sometimes then there's there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen in many cases. And then from a legal perspective, obviously the moment we're paying people out based on an asset that they own, that brings up other legal questions around like whether it's a security. And that was a whole line of logic we weren't comfortable getting involved with at this stage in the game. And the other reason for that is like we're really passionate about NFTs being used to enable fan experiences. So with the exception of ape staking, which went live today, which I'm not an expert on, but I imagine that, there's a way to monetize your PFP in a very straightforward way. But overall, like most of the successful NFT projects right now you're not getting royalties from somewhere else. You're not getting a check from somewhere else. Even like MetaHero, like they had the POW token, but like it wasn't that successful. So the things that have been successful are things where there's a really incredible community of people that's formed, and that community wants to continue to be part of that community, prove that they are part of that community by repping the NFT that they have. And at a higher level, like it's really incredible fan experiences or user experiences or cultural experiences. And our thought was, how can we build an NFT ecosystem in music that creates a great fan experience and creates the kind of experience where eventually like people won't even know they own an NFT. Like I always say, like there's a world where you could explain to your mom or your brother or your sister how the Hume Genesis works without saying the word NFT. Like if you were just like, look, there's this cool music project with this artist I love named Angelbaby, and I own this token on the internet, and it lets me listen to unreleased tracks, and it lets me choose what Angelbaby is going to release next. Like they're going to understand that. And that I think there's a lot of power and value in that. And I think that's where the future of a lot of the NFTs that are based around media need to prove that they can allow access and they can allow fans to do something that they want to do and that they're excited to do. And the Hume Genesis is the beginning of doing that. And I think, what we did with All Gold Spaceship is the beginning of doing that. And the next 8 weeks is going to be exciting as well.
Yeah. And I think aside from that, it focuses the intention, right?
Yeah.
If there is some sort of payout connected to it, then you're, of course, going to get a bunch of people who flood in, and that's all they want to capture. And then you're left void of an actual community of people who are engaging with the music, with the songs, and actually want to be involved in the creative process.
Exactly.
And so then it's like the whole impetus for the thing existing is rendered, null and void as a result. So,
well, and you'll get the wrong, like you end up getting the wrong people if you prioritize the wrong incentives. And that's, that's been the downfall of a lot of projects. If we go back and look at all the, mega pumps during the bull run, a lot of them were just like, they were highlighting flipping. They were highlighting this is going to 10x, this is going to 20x. And you look at the projects that were really successful and they built communities and they allowed those holders to be involved in really cool things or just love the art. Like look at Azuki. Artifact is an amazing example. Like Artifact's all about like you want to be part of a community that values fashion and streetwear. Buy a clone.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that. Now, one of the last questions that I'm just curious about, we're going back a bit. Y'all have been thinking about this, you and Jay, since 2016, right?
Yeah.
At what point did you see the influx of the perception of something like this from the record labels, where it's not just this super niche thing, but them really looking and saying, honestly, we need to diversify because all of our artists right now are human beings, and sometimes that shit gets a little inconvenient, even though it's still going to be people behind somebody like Angelbaby. The flexibility in the different markets that you can tap into, because historically overseas, virtual artists have been popping for far longer than they have in the West. I think a lot of that is down to the anime culture that's out there and just the digital culture that's out there. A gentleman I know, he works at Offbeat Media, and they do like some real-time mocap live streams of these digital avatars and all of that. And they've seen great success with it. So would you say it was when people were hearing in the news that people were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on Bored Apes, that then it clicked for them more so at some of these, offices where they're like, yo, you remember David? Call him back real quick. Call him back. we think now's a good time.
Yeah, I think, look, there were a couple milestone moments. One was NFTs. Like people were like, okay, people want to own digital, all sorts of people want to own digital PFPs. People want to own digital art. People want to own,
just digital assets,
money, like digital assets in general. Like that was a light bulb where people wanted to talk to us again. And the other thing, honestly, was they saw Angelbaby. They saw videos from the performance at Art Basel. They saw that there was a hyper engaged community around Angelbaby, even though it was a niche community, especially, in the beginning when it was really, Angelbaby came out in Fluf World, and that Fluf World ecosystem was Angelbaby's entire audience for a while. But I think they saw what was going on in terms of digital ownership, and they saw that there was an actual example of a virtual artist that people were connecting to and relating to and buying NFTs from. And that was those two things combined were kind of the aha moment. And to be like before then, like before NFTs, like people did not get it, and they started to get it a little bit after NFTs were around. They're like, okay, maybe. And then when they saw Angelbaby and in that early success and the performance at Art Basel and we did the scene drop, I think that was January of 2022. That's when people were like, oh, there's like real fans who care about this and are engaging with it and want to purchase merch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the battle that every founder has to fight, is being early enough with high enough conviction that even when people don't get it, you're like, all right, that's cool. Like you'll get it, later when it's proven out. But the other thing is just y'all's execution technically is impeccable. I mean, when I first came across, because I'd seen one of the first songs that was put out on OpenSea, and it was kind of stylized, looked more like a graphic novel almost. But then I heard about the Genesis collection going up, and I saw the website and just the polish, man. I hadn't even seen the videos yet. And then when I saw that, I'm curious from kind of like a founder and operator standpoint, how you all are able to execute at such a high level. Because I don't know if your background before this, you were involved in some project. No, genuinely, I'm just curious, because that's part of what the show is for like founders to kind of get their minds right around things. Because like I said, y'all are hemmed up on that area. So is there any perspective on just how y'all got your QA to such a point of knowing like, no, it's not quite ready yet, it's not quite ready yet, but then knowing when it was at that place where y'all were happy with it and also knew that like you were leagues above whatever else was out there?
I think first off is you need to have a great team. Like I'm not I can get around Photoshop, I can get around Figma, but like I'm not A+ UX designer or creative director or 3D animator. So first off is like, as a founder, realizing early on, like you need to make sure you have the right team around you and the right people around you, and that how do you get those people to buy in to the mission and vision as much as you do? And if you don't do that in the beginning, you're probably not going to make it very far. So my background was in product strategy and Web3. So I had worked with I worked at a firm called Vaudeville Ventures, which was a boutique consulting firm. And I'd worked with companies like Comcast NBC and MGM, launching different tech products a lot of the time. And then Jay is obviously co-founder on the team. Like he's as a career as a songwriter and producer, has had songs with Selena Gomez, G-Eazy, Demi Lovato. And then Ethan is our creative director. Mm-hmm. He's had incredible experience. He worked at an LA-based agency. He's worked with companies like Nike, Google. And then Mikey's just an incredibly talented 3D director. And a lot of that polish in terms of the visual side is stuff where, Mikey and Ethan are able to make sure that we're starting at a very high level every time, and they do incredible work. But a lot of it is just, to go back to the core of your question, it's all about communication. It's about communicating like when to go really fast and when something is good enough, because you can always make it more polished and more polished and more polished. But if you have a team that believes in the vision, that saves you a lot of time too, because you have a foundation you're all building from. You have a aesthetic that you've established and you believe in, and then that lets you work a lot faster too. When everybody knows we have this thing we do when we're starting a project. We call it the why what. So let's say we're about to make an Angelbaby album video, for example, like we just released, which got done in an unbelievably quick turnaround time. But we start everything with a why what, so everybody knows why are we creating this thing? Why are we creating this web page? Why are we creating the spot? Why are we releasing this song? And what is it? And what is it isn't just it's a Angelbaby album. It has to go deeper than Angelbaby album trailer video. It has to go deeper than that. And same thing on the why side. We really take the time to know why we're doing what we're doing and what it is. And having that foundation helps deliver a much more excellent product at the end of the day, and saves a lot of time because everybody's starting on the same page. And even with that, it still requires a ton of communication. Like we're talking on Slack, people are, we're mostly remote. So, calling people quickly, being like, no, I think it needs to be like this. I think it needs to be like that. But I think it all boils down to having a great team that, you can trust, having a really clear foundation of what you're doing from the onset. And then even with those two things, you need to be communicating like every day, really clearly, really honestly. And that's how you get great work at as fast of a pace as you possibly can.
How many people roughly is it on the team right now?
The team right now is roughly 13.
That's dope. That's dope. And given y'all raised about 12 million, can we expect y'all to be going deep and fast in 2023? Or are you all, trying to say, hey, let's, because I hear that 2023 is the year of the rabbit. I don't know if that's
2023 is the year of the rabbit. Is it actually the year of the rabbit? I mean, I know it's the year of the rabbit.
Yeah, I think like for real, like Chinese calendar is the year of the rabbit, I think.
That is great. I need to tell Angelbaby that, because that's great news right there. Look, we're gonna keep going as fast as we can. I think a big part of this is Angel needs to. We want to expand this as far as we can and get as much of the Hume world out there as we can. The world, the music, the Metastars, the whole thing. So we're honestly always trying to go as fast as we can, and I think next year will continue to be fun. And if you look at just like what we're doing over the next 8 weeks is the most amount. I mean, we're gonna have content every Tuesday and Thursday, plus a decision on a song at the end of the month using the spot. And this time all the voting will be native. So last time people had to jump out to snapshot.
Nice.
This time it'll all be within the platform. So we're moving as fast as we can. And I think, we're gonna continue to be one of the premier companies and brands when it comes to Metastars and virtual artists.
In good faith, as you know, like we all win, we all eat sort of space. What other projects do you look at that you admire that are also in the Metastar ecosystem?
In the Metastar ecosystem?
Or just virtual artists. It doesn't even necessarily have to be Web3, but just virtual artists that you look at and you're like, that's quality. Like we'd be down for a collab.
There aren't a lot, and it's not because there aren't. Like, it's hard to do. So there's only so many people doing it. But Vega Genesis, I think it's one guy. He's got Vega Genesis and Junior. He's a clone. He does an incredible job, I think, of the content he puts out, and the music is cool. And I think it's really great the way he's been kind of pushing boundaries within his world. Spotty Wi-Fi, he's a virtual artist in a way too. He's incredible. I love what he's doing with his most recent release, where you're going to be able to get a physical vinyl version of some of the music that has an NFC chip, so you can basically like verify that you own the record. Spotty and Vega are probably my top two in this area. Especially thinking of Web3 specific, like those two are really, I think, doing a lot of great work.
And then before we head out of here, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to Web3 music? Not necessarily just virtual artists, but Web3 music. And then what do you think is the greatest opportunity about Web3 music?
The biggest hurdle for Web3 music is that it's still too hard and siloed to like go buy a music NFT and get involved in this community. The community still feels siloed and a little clicky. I think, you got to be on Twitter. You need to go to sound, or you need to know about, you basically need to like be on Twitter, and you probably need to be using, be on sound XYZ to a certain extent.
And they got to let you on that joint.
And they have to let you on. Yeah. Or you're like Hume, or like we use Twitter to like build our own audience, and we have our own NFT. Same thing with someone like Vega and Spotty. I don't think they've done anything on sound. And you're able to build your own audience and do your own mints. But, the biggest artists on the world, and in some ways you could argue the largest music platform on earth right now, is TikTok. And until Web3 music and Web3 music artists are spending more time on TikTok and bringing people in who aren't on Twitter or Sound XYZ every day, that might not be the answer, but the audience needs to grow is the bottom line. And I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers for how that audience grows, but I'd imagine if TikTok's, a huge, arguably the biggest, in my opinion, it's the biggest music app in the world in many ways. And I think as more Web3 artists start to be on that platform and pulling people who are just watching a TikTok, I think about it with Angelbaby, like Angelbaby to TikTok is coming. So another, why next year is the year of the rabbit. But, if you're just like, oh, who's this like awesome rabbit talking to me, this awesome Fluf, and what's that song? And then you're like, oh, I can buy this, like, forget calling it an NFT. You're like, I can buy this thing that lets me choose what songs this character is going to release. Like, I want to do that. That's kind of what we need the flow to look like for Web3 music to grow. So biggest challenge right now is just size of the audience. Also is the biggest opportunity, because if you can build in Web3 right now and be one of the premier Web3 artists, Web3 fashion company, Web3 gaming company, by the time like more and more people are coming in and starting to interact with this technology, you've already set yourself as the standard. So they're going to go into Google and they're going to be like Metastars or what people were calling it Phygital for a little bit. I don't know if we're still calling it Phygital, but NFT fashion brands, and like 90cc will probably come up from G Money, or in our case, like Angelbaby is going to come up when you type in Metastar. And now you're going to have all those people flooding to the companies and brands that established themselves during this time. So yeah, the biggest opportunity is there's not a lot of people here right now. And if you're able to build and survive and get to the next level, you will be noticed as more people start to onboard into the space. But also, let's be honest, there's not tens of millions of people here right now.
Coming soon, loading. Man, thank you again, David. This has been great. Learned a lot. Had a good time. Before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find everything about Hume, Angelbaby, and get in contact.
Thank you. It was great being here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So everybody, I will leave the notes in the video where you can see where to go to check out Hume, where you can get in contact and follow Angelbaby, follow David if you want to do that. But yeah, it's some cool music, some cool videos, and it's just the beginning. And I look forward to see what new Metastars come out, what new genres y'all get into, all of that.
I look forward to the year of the rabbit. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Hell yeah, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, brother.
All right. You too.
Peace.
Bye.
You niggas ain't cheat me. You reenacted TV. I'm a real life shot caller. You niggas just shoot at the breeze.